Hi, everybody. My name's Andrew Krause, and welcome to Music Theory Logic. Today's going to be another music theory breakdown. Today's song is going to be the song Alone by Marshmello. Now, let's go look at the session. So here we are in Logic Pro. This is my recreation of the song Alone. I'm going to go ahead and play it for you, and then we're going to talk about the notes involved and some of the music theory. Before I play it, I'll mention, I do my best to choose similar sounds so that the song is definitely like close to the original. But at the same time, my goal isn't to necessarily recreate the mix or to recreate all of the sound design involved in the song. The goal is to really show you all the different notes, where they come from, the theory used in the song, so that you can better understand music theory and hopefully better understand your own production journey. So here we go. Let's listen. This is where we get the main vocals. Legendary Skrillex vocals. Cool. So hopefully that sounds close enough to you to the original track Alone to want to listen to the next music theory breakdown. Again, the vocal chop isn't really perfect on that like middle section, but I did create that in Logic's EXS24 from sampling the actual vocal chop from Alone. I believe the notes are right, but some of the attack isn't quite the way I would want it. Let's go ahead and look at where these notes come from. So the song Alone is in the key of D major. The notes in D major are D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, and D again. Let's go ahead and listen to this. It's going to sound like all of our other major keys. You might recognize like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So here is the scale. Cool. And then the actual chord progression we have is a 4 chord, a G major, built on the 4th note from D major. That's this chord. Second chord is an A major. That would be a 5, built on the 5th note. Third chord is a B minor, built on the 6th. Finally, we get the D major. That gives us a 4, 5, 6, 1 progression in the key of D major. Those chords sound like this. Cool. You might be able to even hear alone there. So now when the song starts, we do get those harmonies in a pad, and I'm using an electric piano as well. Then we get this clav sound, which is basically the chord progression. However, we're using like the 1 and the 5 from each of these chords. Now this intro pattern actually uses like a different chord progression than I just mentioned, but still the same key. So we're going G, D, G, D, G, D. That's basically the G major chord. Then we hit A on our way to B, F sharp, B, F sharp. So this is like G major, a B minor. This B minor, we're using the 1 and the 5 from each of the chords. We then go back to G major and finally go down to D and A, 1 and 5 from D. So it's sort of the same progression I was mentioning, only we don't get the full A major chord yet. To build that sound, it sounds like a clav sort of synthesizer. So there's the basic sort of arpeggio, or that pattern starting in the beginning, the 1 and the 5. Then we get this main melody. I'm using space harp inside of Logic. So you'll notice the lowest note we're using is our 1, the D, that's very common. We are using a lot of notes basically around like the D major arpeggio. So we start off F sharp, that F sharp, D, A. So that's a D major arpeggio. E, F sharp, E. A little bit of like a fill, second part of the phrase. Then we get like this answer melody, G, F sharp, G, F sharp, E, F sharp, D, sort of a sequence. Let's look at this. Cool. One additional thing, I was using Serum to do this, but I'm filtering it, but I have some noise happening. If you listen to the original recording, you'll hear some noise that happens there, and then the filter sort of opens, almost acts as like an uplifter. It's a really cool layer. I have a different impact in here. I'm using just from Cymatics sample pack, and I have a white noise uplifter going. There's then a clap right before the main drum section. The main drum section, it's kind of interesting. There's no snare. We get a crash and kick drum pattern happening at the same time. It's doing a syncopated pattern, or what we would say as like eighth note triplets. I believe, yeah, eighth note triplets. Basically 3 boxes of each in 4/4, 16th note. And so that's all lining up. The chord progression then is also fully lining up with the same kick hits, so in the same timing. For the first half of that section, the bass is also playing the root notes from those chords with the same pattern. Then halfway through that, we get this like bigger sub. I took whole notes within the same sub instrument. I then bounced it in place and threw some sausage fattener .life on it, and I'm via bussing using some overdrive on that just to bring it out a little bit more. Yeah, again, this vocal melody section, this is from my sampler. We are basically doing a slightly different melody. We're going from D up to B, down to A and to E. Again, every note that we're seeing is within our actual key. There's a lot of overlap in the sense that we're starting on D again. This B note is new, melodically speaking, compared to the former section, but is still in our key. Works to kind of open it up a little bit, give it more development, and then this being a new vocal chop instrument also sonically makes it pop. Let's hear this. Nice. So again, it's a 4-bar phrase. That means it repeats after every 4. We basically get like the same riff for the first 3, where we're going between D, B, A, and B, hitting E on the way back. The first time we hit E at the end of 4. Second time we hit D at the end of 4. The last 8th note to be specific. We then go back to basically a different version of the first riff, where we hit A on the way to B. And then we finally go all the way up to the octave D on the top side. So again, we're in D major. This main melody like has D at the lowest part, D on the top end of it, and then we hit this low E as a fill. So it's basically like the parallel section. When this repeats, instead of hitting E or D up in this octave, we hit the E all the way down. Cool. I'm going to do a breakout video where I talk about how to make these kind of vocal chop instruments specific to Logic within this instrument, the EXS-24. Nice. So this next section, this is where we get the main vocals, which sounds a lot like Skrillex singing, I believe it is. And there's a lot of format editing on that. So I don't have the actual vocal in here, but I have the background synths. So we have the same thing that had happened in the beginning, the 1-5-1-5-1-5 arpeggio pattern that comes back only on some different instruments. Then where's our melody? We get basically the same melody that we had in the beginning, this D major arpeggio stuff, the same fill. This is all identical. This is mostly identical except a different ending, where we basically like go up to a higher note, D. I am doing this in Serum. It sounds like it's the same sort of melody that happens as in the beginning, but it's on like a super saw. So created that. It's just one oscillator within Serum. I'm using PWM maths, I think pulse width modulation maths, with a unison of 16. This is the crucial part, the 16 voices. Effects wise, just using some compression and reverb. I'm then automating the filter to actually open up as that progresses. That helps the build up. Cool. Sounds somewhat empty, especially this vocal chop section, but that's because the vocals in the song are happening in between. Let's see, this uplifter, this snare pattern, super simple, just a snare sample copied. It's on quarter notes for the first 8 measures. Then it goes to 16th or 8th notes for the next 4 measures. Then it goes to 16th notes for the next 3 measures. What's kind of cool, I have it via automation happening. I basically drew or wrote this in or recorded my own automation, but you're looking at the dry wet mix knob within the reverb I'm using. And so at the very end, as the 16th notes happen, the snare kind of goes away into this like giant space, and that's created by automating the wet of the reverb to come in a lot more. Cool. That takes care of the build-up. Let's look at the drop. syncopated kick drum, snares on beat 3. That means it's a halftime backbeat, super standard for future bass, dubstep type stuff like Marshmello is known for. Interesting thing, there's less sort of cymbals happening. That actually happens with a shaker in the second drop section. We are getting this like crash sound and an open hi-hat on beat 2 and 4. Gives it this sort of like slow boom ta 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 sort of feel, which is cool. The bass, this was fun to do. Basically root note progression, same chord progression, G, A, B, A. I built this sound within Serum. It's pretty fun to do. It's basically the analog BD sine is the main waveform. I'm using the LFO to basically automate the volumes of these. That's what's causing that eighth note stutter sound. So even though you see whole notes here, we're hearing the stutter eighth note. So I'm using 3 oscillators. I'm using a filter, also controlled by that same basically envelope or LFO we're using as an envelope. Then effects-wise, I'm using a tiny bit of dimension expander, a little bit of distortion, and some compression. It was, again, not really focused on building the exact same sound, but I'm pretty happy with how it came out. Cool. Then our melody, this is kind of interesting. We were doing the D as the first note. Now we're basically repeating what is the 3 of the chord. So that is the F sharp. That basically repeats. We get F sharp, steady eighth notes, just like the bass line. So the bass line's doing steady eighth notes. This lead is doing steady eighth notes. Start on F sharp, we go down to D, and then back up to F sharp using the notes in the scale, D, E, F sharp. That repeats the same way, except we do not get the E on the way back. We go straight to F sharp. And then the third measure is the same as the first measure. The fourth measure at the very end, right where the other fills would happen, instead of going down in the scale, we're actually going up in the scale. Again, just notes adjacent in the scale. F sharp, G, A, jumping down F sharp. This high note part, which is definitely pretty noticeable from the drop and a cool moment, happens at the beginning of every other measure in the second half. And it's just the same note, F sharp, but an octave up. So the next F sharp higher. At the very end, we get a little bit of like a new fill. This D, E, F sharp, it's the same notes that we had before. And then this F sharp, G, A, F sharp. This is the same riff that we had at the end of the first 4. This right here. So it's the same thing happening, slightly different spot, but we recognize that. And then we basically run down the scale from A all the way down to E on our way back to D. Cool, so that takes care of the first half of the drop. This second half of the drop has the same melodic stuff happening, basically like a mirror of the first 8. We get just the bass. I guess that's wrong. Just the bass for the first 4. And the drums go away, and then we get a new kick drum pattern. This is reminiscent of the first section that with the kick drum, in that we have this rhythm, only that was happening in the beginning of the measure, so it's kind of flipped around, although that triplet, that what I called eighth note triplets, the syncopation is an integral part of each section of the song, and so that's where that sort of started in the song rhythmically. We're doing 2 quarter notes in a row. There's some crashes happening on the first and the fourth beat. Let's see, we get a shaker that comes in. It's just steady eighth notes, but it starts on the last quarter note, so 2 of them right before the kick drum comes in. There's no snare in this section. We just get the shaker and the kick and the crash. gives it kind of a cool, almost like hard style or like faster section because there's so much kick drum. Like it a lot. And then after that drop section, we come back into our main, I guess, melody, the first melody that we heard. So I'll play the drop one more time. Let's see. Let's zoom in on our drums. All right, cool. Yeah, so hopefully you found this helpful demonstration of some music theory. We saw the scale D major. We saw a chord progression in the 4, 5, 6, 1. Hopefully I demystified this track a little bit. I know wasn't totally perfect sonically speaking, but hopefully you better understand the way that the song was written, where the melodies come from, the chords. Hopefully you can better write your own music or understand music that you like. If this was helpful, you'd help me out a lot by subscribing to the channel. Leave me a comment if you have any ideas on other songs you'd like to see music theory breakdowns for. I'm always looking for those, so leave me a comment. If you're curious about my music, I will link to that below. And if you're curious about my music theory textbook, I will link to that below. Once again, my name's Andrew. Thanks for tuning in to Music Theory Logic. I'll see you guys next time.